I will never forget the moment my legs stopped working. 1 second, I was walking across my parents' brand new wooden balcony, trying to escape yet another family gathering I never wanted to attend. The next second, my foot slid across the slick surface like ice. I felt myself falling backward, helpless, weightless, and then came the brutal crash. My lower back slammed against the iron railing before my body crumpled onto the wooden boards. A sharp crack echoed in my ears. My vision blurred. I tried to move, but there was nothing. Below my waist, my body had vanished, and standing above me, laughing at what he thought was the punchline of a perfect prank, was my brother, Ryan. "Nice fall, sis," he sneered, holding a red Solo cup in his hand. His friends chuckled, like this was the climax of some twisted comedy routine. But it wasn't comedy. It was horror. I gasped. "I can't feel my legs." The words felt foreign, impossible, even as they slipped from my mouth. My chest tightened, and panic surged through me. Surely someone would help. Surely my parents would rush forward, terrified for their daughter. Instead, my father's voice cut through the chatter like a whip. "Get up, Emily. Walk it off. You're embarrassing yourself." And then my mother's whisper, sharp as broken glass. "Stop ruining Ryan's birthday. Everyone is watching." I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Pain radiated through my spine, my breath shallow, my face wet with tears. Yet the people who should have cared most, my own family, looked at me as if I was the villain in their perfect suburban picture. The guests circled around, waiting to see what I would do. Some curious, others uncomfortable, but none daring to act against my family's judgment. I was paralyzed, terrified, betrayed, and as I lay there, staring up at the Colorado sky, I realized something even more chilling. Their denial of my pain wasn't just cruelty. It was about to make them criminals. The laughter around me felt like knives. I was lying flat on the wooden balcony, staring at the endless Colorado sky. But all I could think was, why can't I move my legs? I tried to push myself up, but agony exploded through my spine and pinned me down like a vice. My voice cracked as I begged, "Please, I can't feel anything. Help me." But instead of rushing to my side, my father barked from the grill. "Get up, Emily. Walk it off. You're embarrassing yourself." My mother's face twisted with irritation as she hissed, "Stop this nonsense. Don't ruin Ryan's birthday in front of everyone." Ryan was standing a few feet away, holding his beer like a trophy. His grin was wide, but there was something hollow behind it. To him, this was just another prank. A little wax on the deck, a quick slip, a cheap laugh. He had planned it for weeks, bragging to his friends that he'd finally put me in my place. Watching me writhe on the floor was supposed to be funny, but even he hadn't expected me to scream like this. For a brief second, I caught his eyes, and they flickered with uncertainty. But then, just as quickly, he masked it with a smirk and said loudly, "Come on, Em. Don't be so dramatic." His friends chuckled and nodded, feeding his pride, while my pain was reduced to a punchline. The crowd around me shuffled uncomfortably. Some whispered, others sipped their drinks to avoid getting involved. I was breaking apart in plain sight, and no one wanted to see it. No one, except one woman I didn't know. She pushed through the circle, her tone sharper than anyone else's. "Move! Let me through!" She crouched beside me, her eyes kind but serious. "Emily, I'm Monica. I'm a nurse. Listen to me. You need to stay very still. Don't try to move." Her hands hovered near my legs, but she didn't touch. She didn't need to. The limp stillness of my body was proof enough. I wanted to cling to her voice, to believe she could save me, But my father cut in again, waving her off. "She's fine. She always does this for attention." My mother nodded, whispering excuses about how I'd been prone to episodes since childhood. Their words stung more than the pain, carving deep into the hollow of my chest. Monica didn't flinch. She looked at them as if they were strangers, not parents, and said firmly, "This is not attention-seeking. These are signs of a spinal injury. She needs an ambulance." "Now!" Silence fell over the party. Even Ryan's smirk faltered. For the first time, someone had spoken the truth aloud, and it was impossible to take it back. The laughter died, replaced by a murmur of unease. I lay frozen on the deck, terrified, humiliated, but clinging to the faint hope that someone, finally, was going to believe me. But I didn't know what was coming next. If you've made it this far, you need to know exactly who the players were that night, because each of them held a piece of the story that would eventually destroy the perfect picture of my family. First, there was me, Emily Carter. I was 29 years old, a university librarian in Denver, someone who lived more in books than in family dinners. Growing up in the Carter household had taught me to stay quiet, to make myself small, and to survive by blending into the background. My defining habit? I carried a notebook everywhere, scribbling observations about the world, because speaking them out loud was never safe at home. My red flag? I had learned to doubt myself so deeply that even when I felt pain, I second-guessed whether it was real. That self-doubt nearly cost me everything. Then there was my brother, Ryan Carter, the golden boy, 3 years older, the one who could charm a crowd with a wink and a laugh. Ryan had been a star quarterback in high school, and even though his glory days were over, he clung to them like they were proof of his worth. His signature move? Slapping people on the back just a little too hard, like every interaction had to remind you he was stronger. His red flag? A smile that never quite reached his eyes. When Ryan laughed, someone else usually cried. Behind him loomed my father, Henry Carter, a retired police officer, 6 feet tall with shoulders that filled a doorway and a voice that filled a room. To outsiders, he was discipline personified, a man who believed order and respect were the only pillars worth building a life on. At home, that translated into a cold kind of authority, where love was earned only through toughness. His defining habit? Crossing his arms and narrowing his eyes whenever anyone disagreed with him, like he was still interrogating suspects. His red flag? He had never once told me he believed me, about anything. To Henry, pain was weakness, and weakness had no place in his family. Beside him stood my mother, Linda Carter. She had once been warm, or so I remembered in hazy childhood flashes, but decades of keeping peace in a stormy household had reshaped her into something brittle. Linda worked part-time at a local supermarket, but her full-time job was making excuses. For Ryan, for Dad, for anyone but me. Her defining habit? Smoothing her skirt or adjusting her necklace whenever conflict arose, as if tidying her appearance could make the chaos vanish. Her red flag? She never defended me, not once. Even in moments when her eyes betrayed concern, her lips would move in Ryan's defense. Always Ryan. And finally, there was Monica Rivera. Not family, not a friend. Just a guest at the party. Someone's co-worker, invited almost as an afterthought. She was in her mid-30s, with steady hands and a presence that cut through the noise. A nurse with over a decade of ER experience, she was the only one that night who saw me for what I was, a woman in medical crisis, not a sister throwing a tantrum. Her defining habit? She carried a small first aid pouch everywhere, tucked discreetly in her bag. Her red flag? For my family, it was the simple fact that she wasn't one of them. Outsiders were dangerous in the Carter household because they had no stake in the lies we lived by. These were the people circling me on that deck: the doubter, the enabler, the golden boy, the outsider, and me, the scapegoat. Each of them stepped into their familiar roles, not realizing that the story we had been playing out for decades was about to flip into something none of them could control. And all it would take was one MRI scan to burn those roles into evidence. Looking back, the fall on that balcony didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final act in a play that had been rehearsing for decades inside the Carter household. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. A neat house in Denver's suburbs, a father who wore his retired badge like a crown, a mother who baked pies for church fundraisers, 2 children who smiled in every family photo. Neighbors saw us as solid, respectable, maybe even enviable. But what they didn't see was how fragile that picture really was. When I was little, there were moments that almost fooled me. Friday pizza nights, Dad pretending to be impressed with Ryan's card tricks, Mom reading to me before bed. For a few fleeting hours, I thought we were normal. But those moments never lasted. They always broke apart the second weakness appeared. The first time I learned that lesson, I was 7. I tripped on the driveway while riding my bike and came home with blood streaming from my knee. Dad didn't rush to comfort me. Instead, he barked, "Stop crying, Emily. You're tougher than that." Mom winced but nodded in agreement. Ryan smirked and whispered, "Clumsy." That word became his favorite nickname for me. The one he'd use whenever he wanted to remind me that no matter how smart or careful I was, I'd always be the weak one. The years passed, and Ryan's jokes grew sharper. Once, he locked me out of the house during a snowstorm, laughing from the window while I shivered on the porch. Another time, he swapped out my shampoo with a bottle of dish soap, leaving me with burns on my scalp. He called it harmless fun, but the red welts didn't feel harmless at all. Each time, I told my parents. Each time, they chose him. "He's just teasing," Mom would say, as though the word teasing erased the cruelty. Dad's answer was always the same: "If you're going to survive in this world, you'd better toughen up." And yet, even in that pattern of neglect, there were flashes of what could have been. Dad teaching Ryan how to throw a football in the backyard while I sat on the steps with hot cocoa. Mom singing softly while cooking on Sunday mornings, the smell of cinnamon filling the house. Those memories still sting because they showed me what we could have been, what I desperately wanted us to be. But those moments were always conditional, always reserved for Ryan, never for me. By high school, I had stopped trying to compete. Ryan was the golden boy, popular, athletic, untouchable. I was the quiet one, slipping into libraries, hiding in books, finding comfort in the words of strangers on the page. But Ryan never let me disappear completely. He made sure to drag me back into his spotlight whenever he wanted an audience for his cruelty. Once, he stood me up at the school dance by convincing the boy who asked me out that I had bad breath. Another time, he spread a rumor that I had cheated on a test, and though I was cleared, the whisper followed me for months. My parents' response? "Don't be so sensitive, Emily. Your brother is just having fun. Learn to laugh at yourself." But it wasn't laughter I learned. It was silence. College was my escape. At 18, I packed my life into 2 suitcases and drove out of Denver, promising myself I'd never look back. For a while, I managed to keep that promise. I built a quiet life, university job, a small apartment, friends who actually listened when I spoke. Therapy helped me piece together the broken parts, helped me believe maybe I wasn't weak, Maybe I wasn't just clumsy. But family ties are tricky. No matter how far I ran, the guilt tugged me back. Holidays, birthdays, obligations, the invisible chains of blood. Each visit felt like walking into a cage I had outgrown but couldn't quite escape. The last straw came in the weeks before Ryan's 32nd birthday. Mom called, her voice sugar-sweet but threaded with steel. "Emily, you will be there? It would mean the world to your brother." I hesitated, told her I was busy, but she pushed harder. "Don't embarrass us. This family needs to look united." That word, united, hit like a punch. We had never been united. We had been a performance, and I knew, deep down, that attending was a mistake. Still, I said yes, and as I packed a bag for Denver that weekend, I felt the old dread creep back in. I told myself it would be just one afternoon. Smile for the pictures, eat a slice of cake, leave before dark. One afternoon, I thought. I could survive that. But I didn't know that this would be the last afternoon I would ever walk without pain. The glass of my family's illusion was already cracking, and Ryan was about to strike it with a hammer. The sirens cut through the backyard chatter, and for the first time that afternoon, the noise wasn't about Ryan. Sarah, the paramedic with the calm voice and steel eyes, clipped a cervical collar around my neck, while another medic snapped photos of the boards near my body. I caught the glint of a phone flash, saw his gloved fingers swipe through shots of the balcony floor, the railing, the smear of something glossy that wasn't water. He scraped at it with a sterile swab and sealed the tube. I heard the soft, practiced click of a cap, and then my father stepped forward, jaw set, to announce, "That's not necessary," as if authority could erase evidence. They loaded me into the ambulance, the world narrowed to ceiling lights and the rhythm of my breath inside the mask. I asked where Monica was, the nurse who had believed me when my own family wouldn't. "She's staying to brief police," Sarah said, tapping something into the onboard tablet. "She'll give a statement." A statement. The word landed like an anchor. It meant there would be a record, something fixed that couldn't be bent by Dad's voice or Mom's smile. And then the door shut and Denver blurred. At the ER, everything moved both too fast and too slow. Vitals, X-rays, an MRI request. A form pressed into my hand by a social worker whose badge read, Harper. She spoke gently, but her questions had edges. Was the fall caused by an unsafe surface? Did anyone delay calling for help? Did anyone try to move you? I told her the truth. She didn't flinch when I said, "My dad told me to walk it off." She just wrote it down, each letter a small act of faith. And then she said there would be mandatory notifications. Words like negligence and reckless endangerment floated above me like clouds I couldn't quite name. Hours passed. A nurse adjusted the IV and dimmed the lights. I lay very still, learning the new map of my body, what answered and what didn't. My phone buzzed on the tray. A text from an unknown number. "This is Monica. I'm at your parents' house. Police are here." I told them exactly what I saw. "I'm with you." Relief flooded in, warmer than the morphine. And then the door swung open, and my parents walked in. Mom's hair was smoothed and shiny, crisis grooming, the way she tidied herself when the world felt messy. Dad stood behind her with his hands clasped like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Mom asked, the word sweetheart sticking to my skin like something I didn't recognize. I told her I couldn't feel my legs. She nodded as if she'd expected that answer, and turned to the nurse to ask about quick fixes. Dad cleared his throat. "We've spoken to officers," he said. "They agree this looks like an accident." I stared at him. "Officers?" Old colleagues, he said, too lightly. They know these things can get blown out of proportion at parties. And then my chest tightened, because I knew what old colleagues meant in our house. Favors, pressure, stories shaped like weapons. A detective arrived before their version could take root. She introduced herself as Detective Pierce, her pen already poised. She spoke to me directly, not through my parents. "We've collected substance from the boards," she said. "And several guests mentioned a prank. Did your brother tell you what he did?" I closed my eyes. "He was laughing. He told me not to be dramatic." "Did he admit to applying anything to the surface?" "Not to me, but I heard Monica say it was wax. Or oil." The detective glanced at her notes. "We recovered a half-empty bottle of paste wax in the garage with fresh smears on the lid." She paused. "And a rag that smells like solvent in the kitchen trash." And then she added quietly, "We'll need your clothes. Chain of custody." Ryan texted a group thread while my parents hovered at my bedside. "Everyone good? Don't talk to cops without a lawyer." The messages popped in one by one. "Got it. Yeah, man. So sorry about M. And then a photo bubbled up from earlier in the day. Ryan on the balcony with a beer, Tyler behind him, both grinning. In the background, tucked at the edge of the frame, a silver tin sat open on the railing. The caption, "Shine it up for the king." My stomach rolled. And then my mother glanced down at her phone, saw something I couldn't, and went very still. By morning, the ER had shifted gears from crisis to endurance. A resident mentioned spinal swelling. Another adjusted the traction weights. Dr. Reynolds, the attending, explained what incomplete might mean if we were lucky. My parents stepped out to make calls, and the room exhaled. Harper, the social worker, returned with a notepad. "This is a lot," she said, "but I want to prepare you. Law enforcement may classify what happened in several ways. There's what your brother did, and then there's how the adults responded when you were hurt." She didn't use the word criminal. She didn't have to. And then she asked if I had somewhere safe to go after discharge that wasn't my parents' house. I nodded too quickly. Safe wasn't mine to promise anymore. Detective Pierce came back that afternoon with details that made my skin prickle. "We've canvassed the block," she said. "Your neighbor across the alley, Mrs. Patel, has a security camera that faces the back fence. It doesn't capture the fall, but it caught your brother on the balcony earlier with a metal tin and a rag. It also caught your mother rinsing a sponge at the hose after you were transported." I swallowed. "Cleaning?" The detective's gaze didn't waver. "We'll see. The timing's notable." And then the door eased open and Monica slipped in, quiet as a promise. She took my hand and squeezed once. "You're not crazy," she said in a whisper meant only for me. "Your legs are telling the truth. So am I." She told Detective Pierce exactly what she'd told the paramedics. The limpness, the absent reflexes, the waxy sheen, the parents' refusal to act. "I'm not here to make a scene," she added, "but I won't let them rewrite this as a fainting spell." She glanced toward the hall, where my father's shadow paced like a tide line. "He tried to intimidate me in the driveway," she said matter-of-factly. "Told me I'd misunderstood. I told him I've coded enough patients to recognize spinal trauma in my sleep." And then she smiled, not unkindly, and said, "He backed off." By day 2, Ryan's friends were cracking. Tyler, loyal until loyalty meant consequences, left me a voicemail I played twice to be sure I'd heard him right. "I didn't know he'd go that far," he muttered. "He said it would be funny." He made a big thing about no harm. His message ended with the clink of glass and a muffled, "Don't use this against me, okay?" And then Detective Pierce told me Tyler had flipped his story in a formal interview, too. First it was, she slipped because she's clumsy. Then it became, okay, maybe there was wax, but not a lot. Mom visited alone that afternoon, her eyes rimmed pink, her hands rubbing the same circle over and over on the hem of her sweater. Your father is upset, she said. This has gotten out of control. I looked at her, waiting for the part where she said your pain matters more than optics. It didn't come. Instead, she whispered, if you could just say you didn't see anything, it would help. I didn't see anything, I said, my voice flat. Because I was on the ground. I couldn't feel my legs. She flinched. For a moment, something like honesty flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or regret. I told your father the boards looked shiny, she blurted, and then caught herself, too late. And then she stood, smoothed her hair, and said she'd bring my favorite tea tomorrow. The next morning, Dr. Reynolds stood at the foot of my bed with a tablet. We have your MRI, he said. The images glowed on the screen, clean whites and shadowed grays, a map of the place where my old life had been. He traced along the T12L1 junction, explaining compression, contusion, swelling. We've stabilized what we can surgically, he said. But the cord has been injured. It's not severed. That matters. My throat burned. Will I walk? I won't pretend to know yet, he said softly. Time and rehab will tell us more. And then he added, but whatever happened on that balcony, the delay in immobilization didn't help. The words lodged like a stone. Delay, a choice, a wound that widened because belief came late. News traveled faster than my body could heal. Dad's old colleagues became conflict of interest, and a different precinct took over. Someone from the DA's office called to say they were monitoring. Ryan's posts vanished from his socials, then reappeared with captions like prayers up and family first. Monica texted me a screenshot a guest had sent her of the party group chat. My mother asking people to stick to the story that the deck was wet from spilled beer. The timestamp was 5 minutes after the ambulance left. And then that same guest forwarded another screenshot. Ryan, earlier that week, bragging that the balcony was going to be a slip and slide. When Detective Pierce returned that evening, she was careful with her words. We're still gathering, she said. We have the product tin with prints, the rag, the neighbor's footage, and conflicting statements. She paused. We also have a measurable delay between your fall and the 911 call. The room was very quiet. I need you to be prepared, she said. This may go from accident to something else. My heart thudded in my throat. Something else, I repeated, because giving it a name felt like letting it breathe. She nodded. Potentially criminal. That night, alone in the dim of the step-down unit, I replayed every glance, every word, every choice. The wax shining like a second skin on the boards. My father's voice telling me to get up. My mother's fingers obsessively smoothing her collar as if neatness could save us. Ryan's grin collapsing into a flinch when Monica said, spinal. So many moments I'd once dismissed as ordinary dysfunction now aligned into a pattern. Harm, denial, control. I felt grief and fury and a strange, steady calm that came from realizing the truth had stopped asking permission to exist. And then, just before midnight, my phone pinged again. An email, subject line, incident report, preliminary. It was from the hospital's risk management office, automatically CCing me on the documentation because I was the patient. I opened it and read words I'd never expected to see attached to my name. Suspected intentional hazard, delayed care due to bystander interference, law enforcement notified. I stared until the letters blurred. Rising suspicion wasn't a feeling anymore. It was paper. It was evidence bags and screenshots and timestamps. It was a stain on wood that wouldn't wash away. No matter how hard my mother tried to scrub the surface, or my father tried to shout the room quiet. And then the door opened, and Detective Pierce stepped in with a folder under her arm, and the kind of face people wear when they're about to change your life. Detective Pierce slid the folder onto my bedside table with deliberate care, as if the weight of it might break me. I braced myself, heart thudding so loud it drowned the hospital machines. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. The first showed the balcony floor, slicked with a faint sheen. The second, a tin of wax from the garage, its lid smeared and fingerprints lifted from its surface. The third, a screenshot from the neighbor's security camera. There he was, my brother Ryan, caught in plain sight, crouched with the tin in one hand, a rag in the other. No party noise, no laughter. Just him, alone, deliberately wiping the boards. I stared at the image until the edges blurred. For years, every time I accused him of cruelty, I was met with denials. He's just teasing. You're too sensitive. You must have imagined it. But here it was, frozen in pixels. Proof that my pain wasn't imagined. Proof that the slip wasn't an accident. Detective Pierce leaned in. Emily, your brother admitted to spreading wax. He said it was a prank, that he never intended real harm. Her voice was calm, but her eyes flicked toward the door, where my father's shadow loomed. But intention doesn't erase consequence. The air felt thin, a confession, evidence, witnesses. It was enough to shift the story from a tragic accident to something darker. And yet, as much as I wanted to feel vindicated, a new question rose sharp in my throat. Why did my parents stand by him? Pierce must have seen the storm in my face. We're also investigating the delay in calling for medical help, she said carefully. Multiple guests reported you begged for an ambulance, that your father told you to walk it off, that your mother dismissed you as dramatic. She paused. If confirmed, that could be considered negligence. Negligence. The word burned. It meant their refusal wasn't just cruel, it was potentially criminal. My parents' silence, their dismissal, wasn't just another page in a long book of betrayal. It was evidence. But then Pierce added something that hollowed me out even further. We found a text thread between your brother and your father earlier that day. Ryan sent a picture of the wax tin with the caption, "Don't worry, it'll be funny." Your father replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I felt the world tilt. My father knew? He had seen? He had approved? The detective closed the folder gently, letting me sit with the wreckage. We're not drawing final conclusions yet, she cautioned. But Emily, this wasn't just a prank gone wrong. It may have been encouraged. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My whole childhood rewrote itself in that instant. All the times Dad told me to toughen up. All the times Mom smoothed her skirt instead of speaking up. All the times Ryan smirked while I cried. Suddenly, they weren't isolated incidents. They were parts of a system designed to protect him, to silence me. Monica came to see me that evening, her presence like a tether keeping me from drifting away. She listened quietly as I told her about the photos, the confession, the text. She didn't try to soothe me with false comfort. She just said, "Sometimes the truth sets you free, but first it burns everything down." That night, as machines beeped and the morphine dulled the sharpest edges of pain, I realized two things. One, I wasn't crazy. My brother had deliberately set me up. Two, the betrayal might go deeper than I ever imagined. Because if my father had known, If my mother had chosen to protect them both, then maybe I wasn't just the victim of a cruel prank. Maybe I was the scapegoat in a family conspiracy I still didn't fully understand. The morning after Detective Pierce's reveal, I stopped waiting to be rescued. Still groggy from painkillers, I opened my phone and began piecing together a timeline, minute by minute, text by text. If my family had always written the story this time, the evidence would belong to me. Hospital records showed my fall had been logged at 3:42 p.m., but the 911 call wasn't placed until nearly 20 minutes later. I messaged Monica, and she confirmed. She had begged for help, but my father waved her off. Only when she called herself did paramedics arrive. My stomach tightened. Their delay wasn't just cruel. It was deliberate. That evening, I captured screenshots from Ryan's group chat before his friends could start deleting messages. The thread was full of panic. "Don't talk to cops. Lawyer up." And even a picture of the wax tin with the caption, "Shine it up for the king." I recorded everything because I knew the truth had a way of being scrubbed clean when my family was involved. But every step forward came with pressure pushing back. My hospital portal suddenly showed failed login attempts. Someone trying to get in. I changed my passwords, turned on two-factor authentication, and sent everything to Pierce. Her reply was short but sharp. "Preserve everything. Don't delete." Later that day, a knock at my hospital door brought Mrs. Patel, the neighbor with the security camera. She handed me a USB drive with footage I hadn't expected. Ryan crouching alone on the balcony with a tin in his hand. Even worse, after the ambulance left, the camera caught my mother rinsing a sponge at the hose and muttering, "Just make it look like spilled beer." I stared at the screen, my chest burning. For the first time, I had proof of more than neglect. I had evidence of cover-up. I called the contractor whose sticker was still under the balcony rail. He confirmed the boards had been finished with non-slip urethane. "You put wax on top of that?" he said. "It's like greasing a bowling lane." Within an hour, he emailed me photos, invoices, and a signed statement. It was official. The deck wasn't an accident waiting to happen. Someone had engineered the danger. That night, the phone rang again. This time, it was my parents' insurance company, already filing a claim for an accidental fall caused by spilled beer. My blood froze. They weren't just ignoring the truth, they were rewriting it. I immediately forwarded the footage and contractor's statement to the claims email. 10 minutes later, my mother called in a trembling voice, begging me not to send things without talking first. I cut her off. "Mom, my legs don't work." She fell silent, then whispered, "I'm making your favorite lasagna for when you come home." As if food could erase betrayal. When I thought I had seen it all, a message appeared on my Instagram. It was from Kayla, an ex-girlfriend of Ryan's. She wrote about jokes that left bruises, pranks that proved control, and one night when he greased a dorm stairwell just to watch someone fall. Attached was a video, Ryan smirking into the camera, whispering, "Watch this," before a body crashed out of frame. My hands shook as I watched. This wasn't the first time he'd done it. It was a pattern. I sent the video to Pierce, who confirmed they'd authenticate it. Not long after, an unknown number texted me. "Bringing up exes won't save you. Screens go both ways." I didn't reply. I simply saved it to my growing archive of threats. By then, I realized I needed legal protection, so I called an attorney named Marisa Hale. She moved fast, issuing letters to my family and Ryan's friends demanding they preserve all evidence. "If they delete," she told me, "that's spoliation." I didn't know the word, but it sounded like armor. Monica brought more than tea that evening. She carried an unmarked envelope someone had slipped under her windshield wiper. Inside was a wad of cash, $200. No note. A crude bribe, nothing more. She handed it to the police without hesitation. "They're scared," she said simply, and she was right. Fear was seeping into every corner. My father stormed into my room, his face carved in stone. "You're going to ruin your brother's life," he said. I met his eyes for the first time without flinching. "He ruined mine," I answered. That night, as I lay in the dark, a final message came through. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a confession waiting in disguise. A woman named Lena, one of the party guests, sent me a Dropbox link. She had filmed Ryan's birthday toast, but her phone had kept recording after she set it down. The audio captured murmurs, laughter, and then, clear as day, my father's voice saying something that made my blood run cold. I didn't finish listening. Not yet. I saved the file, knowing it might be the key that unlocked everything. Because in that moment, I understood. The pursuit wasn't just about finding out what Ryan had done. It was about uncovering how deep my family's betrayal truly ran. The file from Lena haunted me all night. I didn't dare press play again until the hospital halls quieted and the beeping machines steadied into background rhythm. My hands trembled as I slid in the earbuds, opened the Dropbox, and let the recording unfold. At first, it was ordinary party noise, glasses clinking, laughter, someone calling Ryan's name. Then, the scrape of metal against wood. A pause. And then, clear as a church bell, my father's voice. "Just make sure she steps there. Don't overdo it. Enough for a scare, not for a funeral." The words hit harder than the fall itself. My own father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who lectured me about personal responsibility, was instructing my brother how to set me up. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't just Ryan being cruel. It was orchestrated. I replayed the clip 5 times, each loop chiseling away the last fragments of denial I'd clung to. The betrayal wasn't Ryan alone. It was built into the family structure, sanctioned from above. My brother had been the hand, but my father was the voice behind it. The next morning, I called Monica. She came to my bedside without hesitation, eyes searching mine. I held out the phone. She listened, face pale but steady. When the sentence ended, she closed her eyes and whispered, "They planned it." Not a question, a verdict. Detective Pierce arrived within the hour. I handed her the recording. She listened, stone-faced, then nodded once. "This changes everything," she said. "This isn't just reckless, it's conspiracy." She spoke the word with a quiet weight that filled the room. "Your father can't claim ignorance anymore. He's on tape giving instructions." I thought I'd feel triumph, but all I felt was hollow, because as damning as the evidence was, it confirmed a truth I'd spent years trying not to believe, that my pain wasn't an accident and my family wasn't safe. Later that afternoon, my mother appeared, clutching a Tupperware of lasagna like it was a peace treaty. Her hands shook as she set it on the bedside table. "I don't know what you've heard," she said softly, "but your father, he didn't mean—" She trailed off, eyes wet but guarded. I cut her off. "He told Ryan to do it." The words came out flat, cold. She blinked rapidly, as if I had slapped her. Then, in a voice I almost didn't recognize, she whispered, "He thought it would teach you not to make everything so dramatic." I stared. Teach me? My paralysis was a lesson plan? My body, my life, reduced to a cruel parenting tactic? I felt bile rise in my throat. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You're defending it." She didn't answer. She just smoothed the front of her blouse with trembling fingers. the same nervous tick I'd seen all my life, and whispered, "Families survive by keeping things quiet." Then she turned and left, lasagna untouched. I wanted to scream, but the room was too small to contain the sound. Instead, I typed. I documented everything. The audio file, my mother's words, my father's threats. I sent copies to Pierce, to Marissa the attorney, even to my own email under a new account. The evidence had to live in multiple places beyond their reach. That night, the storm broke. Ryan texted me directly for the first time since the fall. "You don't understand. Dad said it was just supposed to scare you. You always ruin things." He didn't deny the wax, or the setup, or the laughter. He only blamed me for exposing it. I read it twice before forwarding it straight to Pierce, and for the first time, I didn't cry. I felt steel settle in my chest. Their words were no longer daggers, they were proof. By morning, news traveled fast. Pierce told me they'd secured warrants for digital devices. The neighbor's footage, Kayla's video, Lena's audio, Ryan's text, they were no longer whispers in the dark. They were evidence in the light. But the biggest twist wasn't legal, it was personal. Because in hearing my father's voice on that recording, instructing Ryan to target me, I finally understood. I wasn't just the unlucky sibling. I was the designated scapegoat, the one chosen to carry the weight of their dysfunction. And if that was the role they had written for me, then this chapter would be the last time I played it. The day began like any other in the rehab ward. Nurses changing IV bags, sunlight filtering through half-closed blinds, but there was nothing ordinary about the storm that was coming. Detective Pierce had told me the night before. "We're serving the warrants in the morning. Your father and brother will know. Expect fallout." I didn't have to wait long. By mid-afternoon, the door to my hospital room swung open without a knock. Ryan stormed in first, his face flushed, followed by my father with that same rigid posture he wore his whole life, like a man carved from authority itself. My mother trailed behind, pale, clutching her purse as if it were a shield. Ryan's voice cracked like a whip. "You had no right to drag everyone into this. You think you're the victim? You think you're the hero here?" His fists curled at his sides, the same fists that once knocked on my locked bedroom door for hours just to make me cry. I kept my voice steady. "I don't think, Ryan. I know. I have the videos. I have the texts. I have Dad's voice telling you exactly what to do." His face blanched. "That's out of context." Dad's hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Enough," he growled, then turned to me. "Emily, you're making a spectacle. This family survives on discipline, not drama." The word, drama, snapped something inside me. "Discipline? You call paralyzing your daughter discipline? You call telling him to coat the balcony in wax discipline?" Silence dropped like a blade. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her lips trembling, but she said nothing. She never did. I leaned forward, gripping the arms of my wheelchair. My voice didn't rise. It cut, low and sharp. "You told him to do it. I heard you. Everyone will hear you. It's over." Ryan sneered, trying to claw back control. "You always needed attention. Well, congrats, Emily. You've got it now. Cops, lawyers, insurance, everyone looking at poor little you. You happy?" Happy. The word tasted like poison. I thought of every night I cried myself to sleep in that house, every time my father told me to toughen up, every time my mother looked away, every time Ryan laughed while I hurt. Happy wasn't the word. Free was. Before I could speak, the door opened again. Detective Pierce stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The room's temperature shifted instantly. Ryan's bravado faltered. My father's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "Mr. Carter." "Ryan," Pierce said evenly. "We've served you both with warrants. Phones, computers, all devices are to be surrendered immediately. We've already collected backups from third parties." She glanced at me, then back at them. "The evidence is no longer in your control." My father puffed his chest. "This is harassment. My family doesn't deserve—" Pierce cut him off. "Your family doesn't get to decide what the law deserves?" For the first time, Ryan looked small. His eyes darted, searching for an exit that didn't exist. My mother clutched his arm, whispering his name, but he shook her off. "Emily," Dad said, turning back to me, his voice dropping into that commanding tone I'd spent my life obeying. "Shut this down! Right now! You don't want to see your brother in prison. You don't want to destroy your family." I felt the weight of decades pressing against me, demanding silence, obedience, sacrifice. But I wasn't 7 years old anymore. I wasn't bleeding on the driveway, waiting for comfort that never came. I was a woman with evidence, with allies, with a voice that finally refused to break. "You destroyed this family the moment you chose to protect him instead of me," I said, my words steady as stone. "And now, you'll answer for it." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Ryan lunged forward, his face twisted in fury. "You think anyone cares? You think anyone will believe your little victim's story?" Before he could take another step, one of the officers intercepted him, gripping his arm. "That's enough," the officer barked. Ryan jerked against the hold, but he wasn't in control anymore. My father's face turned crimson. He glared at Pierce. "You don't know what you're doing. Families discipline their own. This is nothing but a misunderstanding." Pierce held his gaze without flinching. "Conspiracy to commit assault isn't discipline. Covering up evidence isn't a misunderstanding. It's a crime." For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of fear in my father's eyes. The unshakable man, the lawman, the patriarch, reduced to what he always was, a bully hiding behind authority. My mother's sobs broke the silence. She clutched her purse tighter, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "can't we just fix this quietly?" I turned to her, and for once I didn't beg for her love or her defense. I only said the truth. "There's no quiet left. The world will hear what you chose to ignore." Pierce gave a nod, and the officers guided Ryan toward the door. He shouted over his shoulder, voice cracking, "This isn't over, Emily." But it was, because in that moment, watching him pulled away, seeing my father deflate beside my silent mother, I felt the chains snap. For the first time, I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't the clumsy one. I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the witness, the survivor, the one who turned their silence into evidence, their cruelty into truth, their discipline into crime. And no matter what came next, trials, hearings, headlines, I knew one thing with a clarity I'd never had before. They could no longer erase me. The ward felt different after they left. For the first time since the fall, the air didn't taste like fear. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was space. Space to breathe. Space to imagine a life not bound by their silence. Ryan was arraigned within days. The charges weren't just assault, but conspiracy, negligence, tampering with evidence. My father faced obstruction and accessory charges. The headlines hit the local paper first, then spread. "Family conspiracy leaves daughter paralyzed." Each article felt like both a dagger and a balm. The shame of exposure burned, but it wasn't my shame anymore. It was theirs. I stayed in the rehab center, fighting for every twitch of muscle, every trace of sensation. My legs trembled under the weight of a harness as therapists cheered the smallest steps. They called it progress. I called it reclamation. Every painful repetition was proof that I was more than what they had left me with. Monica became more than a nurse. She was an anchor. She sat with me on nights when court updates kept me awake, reminding me that healing wasn't measured only in muscle fibers, but in courage to keep going. Kayla visited too, bringing coffee and stories of how she finally told her own truth about Ryan. Together, we laughed, not because it was funny, but because survival had taught us laughter could grow out of ashes. One afternoon, Mrs. Patel stopped by with flowers. She pressed my hand and said, "You made them face what they did. That matters." Her words landed like sunlight through a storm. For years, I thought no one would ever believe me. Now, strangers stood as witnesses, but the hardest visit came from my mother. She sat across from me, eyes rimmed red, lasagna left behind on the counter of my room. "I don't know how to live with what we did," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked. For decades, I begged for her to see me, to choose me, and now, she was the one begging. "You can start by telling the truth," I said. She nodded slowly, but I didn't let myself hope. Some people never stop smoothing their blouses. When the verdict came months later, I listened over the phone from rehab. Ryan was sentenced. My father, too. My mother testified halfway, acknowledging pieces, dodging others. It didn't matter. The weight of truth had already shifted. Reporters asked if I felt vindicated. The word didn't sit right. This wasn't about revenge, though revenge was folded into it. It was about finally stepping out of the shadow of a family who built their identity on silence. On the last night before I left the rehab center, I wheeled myself to the garden courtyard. The air smelled of pine, crisp and alive. I closed my eyes and thought of the girl I used to be, the one who cried on stairwells, who begged to be heard, who believed if she just tried harder, she'd finally be loved right. I whispered to her, "You were never crazy. You were never too much. You were always enough." Tears slid down my face, but they weren't the same tears I used to cry. They were lighter, carrying release instead of despair. I don't know if I'll ever walk again. I don't know if my mother will ever admit the full truth, or if Ryan will ever understand the destruction he caused. What I do know is that I am no longer trapped in their story. I am writing my own, and in this new story, I am not the weak one, not the scapegoat, not the accident. I am the survivor. I am the woman who turned silence into testimony. And that, more than any verdict or headline, is the justice I claimed for myself. I've shared my story, but now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your own family betrayed you like mine did? Do you believe forgiveness is possible, or are some wounds too deep to ever heal? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey of truth, healing, and resilience.